MMA True Believers. I am Jason Burgos for SureDog.com, and I am joined by a man set to make his UFC debut on the UFC on ESPN 7 event in Washington, D.C. on December 7th against veteran featherweight Chris Fishgold. But this will not be his first time in the octagon. He's a veteran of The Ultimate Fighter and earned his UFC deal in July on Dana White's Contender Series, and that man is Billy Quarantillo. Billy, thank you for joining me in the lead up to your UFC debut, man.
Thank you. Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. You interviewed me before the Contender Series. Now here we are. You must be good luck.
One can only hope. There's too many fighters I've talked to that ended up losing. Hopefully I don't bring you bad luck on the 7th, but there's so much to talk about, but first I wanted to go back to the Contender Series fight in July because it was a really pivotal moment in your career. We talked, like you mentioned back then, about the pressure of the moment, and you also putting a lot of pressure on yourself in every fight you have, because you mentioned so much that one loss can have such an effect to really set a guy back. When you hit the arena and there is that eerie quiet that the Contender Series has to it, and Dana White sitting over there, does that moment start to affect you at all? Did the weight come on you, or when the cage door closed, it really did become just like any other fight, despite the unique setting of it?
Yeah, it was. It felt familiar in the sense that I was on The Ultimate Fighter, where it's super quiet. It's like awkwardly quiet.
True.
It's almost like you're about to have like a street fight and everyone's just dead quiet, and you're like, it's really not natural because people are always yelling. In the arena, people are always yelling stuff to you. So I've been used to that. But yeah, it was definitely a weird, awkward silence. But I knew he had to deal with it too. It was kind of cool because right before we're about to fight, I'm seeing Herb Dean, and he looked like it was like, his millionth fight. He's like getting his gloves on, and I'm like, all right, here we go. And then so we were the first fight, and the second before we're about to fight, there was like a big screen. So it was like me looking at him, and like right to my left, there's a big screen, and they show Uriah Faber. And they're like, Faber's here, and he's like waving. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, not now, because just to add a little more pressure to it as my Ultimate Fighter coach.
Yeah.
So that was really cool that he came out. He really came out for me. That's what he told me, which I thought was so cool. Yeah. That I'm sure he had business with the UFC. He's in really good with them. But to see all those guys and to kind of redeem myself in the Contender Series, it was a great night.
Now, I want to read this quote from our conversation before the fight in July about trying to get a finish to have a better chance of earning that contract. Now, you said to me, luckily for me, I have a pretty exciting style. My game plan is pretty simple. When the bell rings, I try to hurt you and try to be exciting. Winning is great, but I never want to be one of those fighters where you just lay on the guy or you just go for takedowns over and over and riding it out. It's a sport. Yeah. But if you're not exciting, no one wants to watch you. I've always wanted to be exciting. He's never been finished, but he's never fought someone at my level, being 11-2 now. As that third round started, was there any concern? Like, shit, this guy just will not go away. I keep on battering him, and he just won't go away. Or did you feel like, dude, you're lucky you got out of the third round, you're in trouble?
Yeah, more so the later, because you never know. People, that 1 minute, some people take that minute rest, and they come back a completely different fighter. Yeah. They actually didn't show this on the Contender Series. I don't know what I think they kind of had like a view of like the whole arena or like the whole the studio audience. But in between the second and third round, I made sure I got up off the stool like a little bit early, and I kind of looked over at him, and I could just tell he didn't want to be there anymore. He didn't look enthused. He just kind of looked like, just wasn't ready. And I was actually like pointing to the ground. I was like, this is it. Let's go and finish this thing. Yeah. And he just really didn't have much emotion. So he kind of gave me that tell that he was ready to go. And I knew he was going to go for the shot right away. I defended it, got there, and I knew it wouldn't take long. Kind of going back to what you said, it was kind of funny towards the end of the second round where I was punching him and kicking him and kneeing him. Yeah. My one coach, my jiu-jitsu coach, my main instructor, Matt Arroyo, kept calling for the code word, but basically he was calling for a takedown. And I was thinking, I was like, why take him down right now? I'm out striking him. He's not hurting me on the feet. I was like, the crowd wants to see, people get knocked around. So I was like, no. I was listening to him. And I'm like, nah, man. I'm like, listen to my Muay Thai coach more.
Yeah, yeah. You and like you mentioned that the round didn't last very long for the people that watch. You got the finish 22 seconds into the third round. When that happened, did you feel like a boost of confidence afterwards? Because that has been the common theme with getting contracts on the show. Sure, a decision win could land you a deal, but your chances are far better when you get the finish.
Yeah, yeah. There was so instantly, I just instantly, just like any fight, you're so happy when it's over, especially when you win, obviously. Like, especially ending the fight, Herb Dean stepped in. It's the best feeling in the world. Instantly I thought, all right, that was an exciting fight. I think I did enough to get the contract. But then I kind of thought, I'm like, maybe maybe Dana and the guys are thinking, okay, that first round he got taken down, didn't do great in the first round. So you get all kinds of thought process. But at the end of the day, I knew I couldn't do anything about it anyway. So I kind of just went in the back room and kind of did some silent prayer. Thank God for, keeping me healthy. I was completely fine the next day. I was a little, obviously a little banged up, but nothing broken, no cuts or anything. And I was able to get the contract. So it was a perfect night. We got what we came for, and now it's on to the next one.
Now, I was watching the fight just, again, for research or stuff like that for this interview. And there's a point in it where there's a very Quarantillo yet Diaz moment where you just put your hands down, you're like pumped up. Like, so what was that? Was that just like a heat of the moment? Like, oh, this guy just can't hurt me. I am going to finish. Like, what was that? Is that just instinctive? Was that thought out or just emotion?
No, that was emotion. And that was like, that was a little bit like, almost a little bit frustration. Like, come on, bro. Like, how many times do I gotta punch you and kick you and knee you before you just go down? So that was kind of like a little bit of like, I gotta get this dude out of here. Like, I'm walking him down. Like, and also I knew he had nothing left. He had nothing, no power on his punches. So I was just going to eat whatever he threw at me, and I was just going to keep coming. And even if it would have taken that whole third round, I was just going to do everything I could do to get that finish. And, even if I couldn't get the finish, I just wanted them to know that I was there and I was their guy. And if I can't get the finish, I'm going to be looking for that finish that whole time.
You were one of the 3 fighters that earned the contract that night out of the 5 guys that won. You told me back in July how this was a dream come true, just dream of yours to be in the UFC since you were 16 years old. And we also talked about how you had that brush with the Ultimate Fighter. We talked about these things back then, and didn't reach the goal. But how fulfilling was that moment for you? When you are offered the contract, is it because you talked about like kind of the surrealness of Herb Dean and all that kind of stuff? Was that moment surreal? I mean, does it almost make you want to cry in happiness when something like that you've been looking so forward to for years has happened?
Yeah, it was, it almost did hit me that night. Like, I was just so caught up in the moment. I'm talking to Uriah Faber and Dana White, and I got a chance to talk to those guys, and I'm with my coaches and everything. And, and then right after we went out that night, I'm with a bunch of my friends and family, and it was just an amazing feeling. And it really kind of hit me when I was talking to my brother, and he was like, man, you proved a lot of people wrong. And he's like, how does that feel? And it's like, man, there was a lot of people that like counted me out so many times. And I think that was a big part of it. And like when he mentioned that, I was like, yeah, like you're right. Like, there was definitely a time where I didn't think I was going to get to this point. So it, it kind of hit me after. And then that feeling, the Ultimate Fighter, like, or after the Contender series, it was like, all right, you did it. And then you came back to the gym and everyone was celebrating. And then it kind of went away, like that feeling like you're in the UFC. It went away for a little while. And then when they finally, my manager texted me and said, hey, what do you think of Chris Fishgold and for your debut in UFC DC? And then it kind of all came back to me like, all right, now it's really official. Because, like you're in the UFC when they tell you are, but you're really in the UFC when, you got a date, you got an opponent. And, when I fly out there, that's when I think it's really going to hit me. And then when I make that walk, it's just, it's, like we talked about, I've been dreaming about this moment since I was 16 and everything happens for a reason. I couldn't imagine being more prepared. If I were to lose the Contender series and, I would probably still fight and win a few more fights, but then I might not get in the UFC until I'm, 32, 33. And it's, kind of the end of my career. But right now I really believe I'm in my prime. I started MMA a little bit later. So I've been in it for almost 10 years. And I think, I've read a lot of books about, being a master of your craft after 10 years. And I really think I'm finally hitting my strides. I'm on a 5-fight winning streak. I've knocked out my last 4 opponents, and I'm going into this fight with a lot of momentum.
Now, speaking of that fight booking, specifically the fight and winning on the Contender Series, was in July. Unless you were injured after that fight and needed some time to heal, were you a bit surprised and in a way disappointed? It took over 5 months from that night on the Contender Series to finally get that UFC debut. Were you hoping for something quicker than this?
Yeah. Right away. I posted the next day on my Instagram. Because basically right after that fight, I, during the Contender Series training camp, I really wasn't focused on, where the UFC was going, which cities they're going to, and that stuff, because I was so focused on,
right.
That fight. If you don't win that fight, who cares?
Exactly.
So right after that fight, I looked at the schedule and I saw, Boston, Madison Square Garden, there was a couple other places where I'm like, oh man, how exciting. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end of that schedule, there was that Washington, D.C. card. So I didn't think, I thought I was hoping to get on the Boston card. And then the Tampa card got brought up and I was like, great. But then they're like, oh, we already got, they already have the booked card. So yeah, I did think I was going to fight a little bit sooner, but again, it's not the worst thing in the world to have a longer UFC training camp. And basically I took a few days off, but I was so excited just to be there. And I basically just went back into training camp. I took a few days off, kind of eased into it, and then got right back into going hard, was preparing myself to take a short notice fight. Then my boy, Matt Frivola, we're good friends. We've talked about him. He got on that UFC Tampa card, so he came down for a couple of weeks where we trained our butts off. So I basically felt like I was back in training camp. And then I was like, all right, and then at one point, someone said, I think Sean Shelby mentioned that most of the cards for the end of the year were booked. So I thought I wasn't going to fight till next year. So I was like, come on, guys. So, and then I was worried I would have to take like a short notice fight or, jump up to 55 to do like a late notice fight. So luckily, it worked out. And I think it's for the better. I have a lot of family in DC. I'm going to have a ton of fans. It's going to be very pro Billy Q that night. So it adds more pressure, but I'm used to it, man. I'm ready for it.
Your first fight in the UFC, and you get a legit test in Chris Fishgold. And yeah, his 1-2 record may not impress, but his losses are to really good featherweights. It's Calvin Kattar, who's just in the main event, Makwan Amirkhani, who's a pretty good fighter, with his one win being against David Tamer, a submission win, who's another solid dude in the division. Fishgold is pretty damn good as a grappler. For you, does this fight pretty much boil down to doing everything you can to just keep it on the feet? Or do you feel if the moment arises that you get taken down and are on the ground with them, you can more than handle yourself there?
Yeah, of course, any fight you gotta, really at the higher level. When I was an amateur, I didn't care if I got taken down as an amateur because I had, good submissions off my back and, arm bars and triangles. But of course, in the last few years at the higher level, you never want to get taken down, even if even in the Contender Series, I landed a really hard kick, but once he took me down, I'm like, that it is what it is. But so yeah, I definitely, of course, I don't want to get taken down. I'm going to avoid it at all costs. I'm not going to throw, reckless kicks like I did last time. Don't quote me on that. I might come out and start winging kicks. But also, he's also been taken down too. So I'm not afraid to try to grapple with him. I've seen his weapons. He's got really good chokes, good guillotines, good rear naked chokes. I think I think he's strongest when he gets easy takedowns. And he doesn't have guys that are super aggressive with getting back to their feet. Or he has guys that turn over and they get nervous and give up their back. So I got to really avoid that. Of course, we've been working in the gym like crazy on that. But, I think my striking, I think his takedowns are kind of predictable. He throws a lot of loopy punches and shoots right in for it. He's very aggressive, which, could play into his favor or could play into mine. And I'm sure he knows he's got to work his conditioning because my conditioning was good in the Contender Series. And it's gotten better and better and better and better. And also, it's something that that's exciting for me that we're both in the USADA testing pool because, I would never accuse anyone of taking steroids, but it's just good to know that we're both getting randomly drug tested. I know I've never taken anything. Like, I don't even know how to, I don't know I've always worried. I've always, thought about, I don't want to have anything, any of the side effects. So I know for a fact that at least we're getting tested. I know there's some people that, probably get around it, But it is what it is. We're both being randomly drug tested, and we're both fighting. That night, most likely we're both going to be clean. So he's got to deal with that conditioning. So if he wants to come out super aggressive, if it goes that second and third round, he knows I'm going to be there, still punching and kicking and shooting takedowns. So I'm excited for that.
I mean, since you mentioned that, that's interesting. Did you feel like in your time before the UFC that you encounter guys that you had a sense maybe were on something?
Well, again, I don't want to accuse people.
Accuse away, please.
Yeah, accuse. Honestly, I'll say this. I'm so happy to be. I'm gonna go when I see Jeff Nowinski. I'm gonna give him the biggest hug ever because you see it like everyone gets randomly drug tested. So at least if they do take it, they might get caught, and hopefully they do. I hope he catches everyone that takes steroids. The people that are like the Nate Diaz and the guys who have these tainted supplements, I feel bad for, and I hope that never happens to me because I take a few vitamins and protein, and that's pretty much it. But you look at these other leagues, where they're paying almost as much as the UFC, but they're not drug testing. Come on, like these guys look like action figures. Right. It just doesn't make any sense. They got veins coming out of their neck. Yeah. And just so I don't ever want to go back to that. I don't ever want to go to these other leagues where they're not getting tested till the night of the fight because there's ways around it. And when there's that much money involved, people are going to cheat. It is what it is. So I am so happy with USADA because not only are they super anti, they're super anti, steroids, but they're also very lenient on, like medical marijuana, CBD. I'm much more, I'm pretty much on, very limited meat base. I do a lot of plant-based diets.
Nice.
And I'm very against like all like that anabolic stuff. I think that stuff's terrible for you. So I love it, man. I'm a big USADA fan. Hopefully they can kind of clean up that tainted supplement thing. But man, a lot of people have changed, and a lot of people aren't as successful as they were on the regional scene. Of course, some of it's the higher talent, but some of it is they're not on the same stuff. They're not taking the same supplements as they used to.
Did you bring up the tainted supplement issues that's happened to a lot of guys? Does that make you scared a little bit about being in the pool? Because you have these people that take stuff that they completely think is on the level. It's okay. It's good to use. And then they get, some kind of fraction of something in their system. Does that make you like less willing to take supplements or any kind of things at all? And I don't know if you have like a nutritionist that you work with, but scared of nutritionist suggestions because they may get something they think is right and it's wrong.
Yeah, that's and the good thing about USADA is that it's not their first year anymore. They've done this for a couple of years now, I believe. I think like it's probably been 3 or 4 years. So they do a really good job working with fighters, and as long as you're transparent with them, basically what happens is they come over and before they drug test you, they'll give you a list of the supplements that you put on the list. And you just got to be very honest with them. Be like, hey, I've taken this, I've taken this, I've taken this. And I give them everything, vitamin C, alpha brain, fish oil. I give them every supplement I take. And they say, if, the only way I'm going to test positive for something, if it's in one of those supplements. And it'll basically, I don't know if they cancel the fight, but they definitely give you, basically give you a slap on the wrist if it's something from there. Whereas if you don't tell them you took something and you end up getting a contained supplement, then you're kind of in trouble. So yeah, it's a little nerve wracking. They've tested me 3 times now, which I love because it's one time was like a 6 a.m. call, one time was like a 6 p.m. call on like a Sunday. So it's you basically you can't cheat, which some of these guys I'm sure find a way because I know there's guys that are really good at it. And they have they work with scientists and stuff like that. So it's a little nerve wracking, but I'm always happy to see them because I know that I have a much better chance of fighting on an even playing field than some of these guys in these other organizations that they're making a lot of money. They're fighting for $1 million tournaments and doing that kind of stuff. And dude, who knows, man? Who knows with them?
I mean, this is a rarity because so many fighters complain about USADA, of course, with the supplements thing, but the time, and they show up all these times. Would you say you are the first fighter that's completely in love with USADA, and you would have USADA sponsors if they would sponsor you?
Yeah, I think, I honestly, I don't really want to go back. I don't want to go back to fighting in like regional shows. I fought for regional shows where they won't drug test you at all your whole training camp. And then the night of the fight, they'll test you for marijuana and cocaine and meth. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. You know, I don't want that guy, that my opponent could just be eating steroids every single day. And then, and he's clean. But if I smoke a joint 2 weeks before the fight, I can't fight, but he can. So it just doesn't make any sense. I think the UFC, you know, hats off to them. They're doing the best they can to make it an even playing field. And honestly, I think it makes it more exciting fights. You don't have these big roided up guys knocking people out with, you know, with missed punches, you know. And you look at the other, you know, now you'll start watching. Look at some of these other guys. They're fighting for all this money, and they don't pass the eye test.
Yeah.
You look at them and you're like, come on, bro. Right. You're 37 years old and you're more jacked than a 20-year-old. And, you know, you're more jacked now than you were 10 years ago when you were in the UFC.
Yeah. When we
so yeah, I'm pro USADA until unless they give me the tainted supplement, because I've seen guys that like it's like come on, man, that guy's not steroids.
Now when we talked before, you talked about how, you know, you got a real estate license in the, you know, years back when you had the knee injury and you were rehabbing and stuff like that. You know, I bring it up because I talked to James Krause recently. He's been in the promotion for a while now. He runs his own gym. He invests in real estate, and he's
very smart guy.
Yeah, and he suggested to me in the article that's going to come out soon, young fighters, you know, should keep doing their part-time jobs during their first few fights in the UFC. Take the extra UFC money, invest it, and then after a few fights, you know, you've invested, then buy the Rolex, then buy the Gucci shoes. What about you? Do you subscribe to something like that? Will you keep doing work on the side, even though it's tough, and to just try to set up your future and make the most of this short-term and long-term?
Yeah, of course, man, 100%. Like, so I've taken, you know, the little bit of money I made with fighting, I've tried to invest it and keep as much as I can, because you don't know, man, like, you know, we've talked about this, like when I tore my ACL, you know, the check stopped coming in that day, you know, and then the bills started coming in, the medical bills, the MRIs, the x-rays, the copays. So, and I've never met James, but he seems like a really smart guy. And it's pretty wild to see a guy in the UFC, and he's the head coach to a lot of people in the UFC. Yeah. So that's pretty impressive. So with my real estate license, I was, after the Contender series, I was working there for a couple months. Right now, I'm kind of on, you know, I don't really have a lot of time to show houses and stuff like that because I am so new to the industry, but I'm keeping my license, which means I'm still paying all my fees because I do want to keep it. And every time I fight, I'm going to go back to that. But I also, I keep my part-time job. I actually just did a private lesson. We talked about this before. I teach a lot of private lessons. I teach a lot of classes. I work with a lot of the young fighters, a lot of amateur fighters, a lot of pro fighters now that they're coming up. So yeah, it's definitely important. And not only that, I don't think it takes 24 hours, 365 days to be a fighter. You know, you're going to have time where you need to rest, you need to recover anyway. So you might as well do as much with that time as you can. And if I wasn't teaching, you know, I'm not just going to sit on my ass all day. Right. So I don't mind teaching the next generation. People love doing privates with me because I'm established. They know, you know, they know I can fight. They know I got good jiu-jitsu. They know I can strike. So, you know, they've seen me in action. So it's easy to do it. Hold on one. Oh, someone tried to click in. My dad tried to click in real quick. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. That you do need to find your, you know, you got to find what you do on your side. And I look at that real estate license as like my emergency fund where, you know, if I do get an injury or, you know, for whatever reason I couldn't fight for a little while, I would go right into that. And, you know, I'm still paying my dues. I still have a great relationship with everyone in my office. They had a huge Contender series party for me, which I thought was the coolest thing. It's a bunch of people in like suits and ties and they're going crazy and like watching the fights at the office. I heard a few people brought beers and they were having fun. So, I definitely think it's important, man. And that's just for anyone. You know, you don't want one stream of income because if you do and that dries up, you know, you gotta think fast. So I learned a lot from that torn ACL, and hopefully that never happens to me again.
Now, this is probably my favorite part of the interview. I always like to ask fighters about some of their personal interests, some of their personal passions away from fighting. Because, you know, I've talked to guys and girls, and, you know, it's a stressful job. You know, it's thinking about fighting someone. The idea of fighting is stressful. It can try and drain you. You know, you got to get that time away. So I've heard things like riding motorcycle. I've heard video games a lot. I've heard cooking, comic books, just hanging with the family. What does Billy Q like to do? That has nothing to do with fighting. That it's a true passion of yours.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, man. I'm so invested in this, and it's like it's almost hard to like. I almost have to like think of like, oh, what do I like to do when I'm not fighting? There's a few things. I just got engaged to my girl.
Oh,
This coming,
congratulations.
not this weekend, but the weekend before. And everyone like it was crazy because before I did it, everyone was like, "What are you doing?" Going to I basically went on a cruise to the Bahamas
Oh,
for like a long weekend, and everyone's like, "What are you doing going on a cruise in the middle of training
yeah.
camp?" But I love traveling, and that's something I haven't got enough. I haven't got a chance to do a lot of recently. So going to the Bahamas and not only going to the Bahamas, but we went right into like the heart of Nassau.
Ooh.
Didn't go to like the tourist areas, just went out and like hung out with like the people there, just meeting people from different cultures. I've really found a passion for. Just going to different places. I love doing it. We live in paradise in Tampa Bay, so I love if I can sneak away and get to the beach. Love it because I grew up in Buffalo. I would dream of like I would wake up in the morning, even when I was in high school and college. I would wake up and be like, "Oh my God, man! Like snow everywhere. You're shoveling the driveway. You're driving, 20 miles per hour because you don't want to crash."
Yeah.
So just anytime I could be outside and get away from the gym, I always take advantage of that. Traveling is huge. I'm really looking forward to after this fight doing a little bit more traveling, setting up stuff like that, and just a lot of stuff. It sounds kind of corny, but like learning different stuff. Like I've been trying to learn a lot about like investing and financing. I got some money put away from like my retirement, and just stuff like that. Like where I'm a big Dave Ramsey guy. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a Dave Ramsey's a big financial guy.
Okay.
Like I love following his steps. Basically, like being his steps, like being debt free and doing and just being smart with my money. Now that I'm 30, now that back when I was 25, I didn't really think of this stuff. And just doing different stuff, learning new stuff, just trying to better myself. Watching instructional videos, whether it's fighting or finances or just like dieting and nutrition. I know a lot of people are on that what's it, Game Changers. I don't know if you've heard.
Yes, I love that documentary. It's fantastic.
Yeah, very, very good.
Yes.
I like getting. I think it was obviously a little bit biased, but I'm still. I've always done that, and it was very similar. What I really liked about that was basically when James Wilk starts talking, he was in pretty much the exact same position as me, where he tore his ACL and he had nothing to do. So he basically did exactly what I did. He started reading books and figuring out what the best way to recover was. And I pretty much did the same thing. When I did that, I did the same exact thing as him. And I realized the more healthy, nutritious food you eat, the faster you're going to recover. Instead of going 100%, plant-based, I went about 85%, where I was just eating, vegetables every single day, 2 to 3 times a day. And I gave a lot of credit to my diet to helping me recover. So that's a good example of something that I really enjoy doing, just kind of learning new stuff. Man, there's so much stuff out there, and especially with the internet, and there's so much free stuff that you can learn out there. I love just, diving into new stuff and seeing what I really like to learn and practice.